Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian and I'm joined as always by my good mate Lockie. The Blues this week look to bounce back after recording their fifth loss, the fifth defeat of this season. There's going to be a bit in this game as well against the Dogs. We want to right the wrongs of last week and the Dogs want to do the exact same thing after losing to Port by 48 points. The Dogs find themselves outside the 8 in 11th position. And much like GWS last week, they need a big scalp to get a bit of momentum back and show that they are a top 8 side. There's plenty to discuss as always in this preview, but Lockie, how are you feeling about this contest against the Western Bulldogs?
I am bloody excited, mate. We love when redemption is presented to us. We love coming back from a loss. I also feel like a bit of redemption here from last season. I feel like it was a really pivotal game and time of the season last year where we didn't get over the line. And, you know, it just feels like a good one for us to bounce back.
Yes, no, I very much agree. We talked about it in our review of the GWS game that it's all about kind of how you react to the loss. We knew one would eventually happen. We'd probably lose a game we expect to win. I felt very confident that we'll bounce back. So let's find out this week against the Dogs. I'm confident as always. And so I wanted to take a little bit of a look at the Bulldogs. They've kind of yo-yoed a lot this year. That's how I've found the best description of them. And this may be the dumbest thing you're going to hear on the podcast. It may not be great listening, but I'm going to do it anyway. Because after the Dogs' first 3 games of the season, this is the win-losses, Lockie. They have gone loss, loss, win, loss, loss, win, win, loss, win, loss, win, win, loss. Now, that's obviously just ridiculous, but since the start, that 3-0 start, they have not won more than 2 games in a row, and they have not got that momentum. They've found that they've had quite inconsistent form, and that's really why they're out of the 8 right now. They've clearly got some weapons. Their best, I think, is finals worthy, but the difference between that is the problem right now. I expect them to be at their best against us. You lose a game like that against Port, they weren't playing well either. You need to bounce back. So I'm very confident that we're going to be better than the Dogs. I believe you will be as well. So if you're confident, Lockie, why will we be too good for the Dogs this week? And what have you kind of made of the Western Bulldogs so far this season?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been pretty attentive to them this year and the yo-yo pattern that you spoke to. I definitely am feeling confident. I feel like all over the ground, honestly, we have better weapons than them, to be frank, and show our Carlton bias. I think they've shown that, obviously Bontempelli is one of the best players in the league, so I'm hoping that there's something that we can do about that to minimise that output, which has shown in recent times that if you can do that, it leaves them extremely vulnerable. So I think we know the way that we can go about beating them. I think the blueprint is there.
Yes, no, I definitely agree. They've clearly got some talented players, but I think we match them, if not beat them, in most areas. So let's go out there and show that this time round. And I think that's just why I'm confident each and every game, whether we win or we don't, I just think our best is better. And I'm finally at that point, particularly on this podcast. We've spoken about it since the start. I remember we had that question of when are we going to feel like every single game you go into, you're just calm and think we're going to win. Well, this is that point, even after a loss.
Agreed.
I know that I'm not taking the Dogs lightly. I don't want anyone to think that this is arrogance. I was like this before the GWS game, and I'm probably going to be like that for every game this season until the losses become a trend, until I start to see all the problems happen each and every week. I'm just ridiculously confident on what I see from these boys, but there's one in particular that I think needs a little bit of a love in on this preview, because I can't believe we're already so long into this without bringing him up. We need to do a Paddy Crips love in because it is our Courageous Leaders 200th game this week. He's having another incredible season yet again. And I find that when I talk about Paddy Crips, I tend to run out of words to say about him. I just don't know what to
point.
say anymore. He just does so much. He's so good.
Yeah.
He sets the ridiculous standards for him and the competition. So I need to throw this to you, Lockie, because I've ran out of words. This is a massive, massive milestone for him. So I need to ask you, what is the legacy of Paddy Cripps that he has built so far? And just what are some of your favorite moments of Paddy Cripps in the navy blue?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. A seemingly innocuous question from my girlfriend probably a week ago. And just out of the blue, she goes, "Who is your favourite Carlton player of all time?" And I was like, okay. I need to think this one through.
Yeah.
And it just took me through all the different eras of our life we've been through and all the different, the places this team has been. And I just can't go past him for so many reasons. The way that he came into the club, like the position that we were in then, and everything that he's been through until now, and he's stuck by us, and he's led us through the darkest times of almost any footy club in the 21st century, and got us into this position that we are now, and he's never wavered. Favorite moments, I think the one that definitely jumps out is when the siren went in the Sydney final. His reaction at that moment, like that was one of the best Carlton moments in my life, like getting over the finish line in that game, and to see him kind of fall to the ground and everything in that moment, that was special. What do you have?
Yeah, no, you've summarized that perfectly.
I could go for 20 minutes. So I need to stop myself.
Yeah, I mean, I probably haven't thought about that. Who's my favorite player ever? Because I don't know. I think once you start to get a little bit older, you don't tend to have like those emotions you hold towards players like you did as a kid. So I wonder if that sort of clouds things. But when I was thinking about that just then, all I could conjure up was who is the player that I like care about the most, the one player I want to see just success for. I want to see the most for, and it's Paddy Cripps for all those
100%.
reasons, being the one that had to suffer through those worst periods to come through at the other end, to have to be the leader that got us here. There's been, a couple of questions thrown out on Twitter that if, Paddy Cripps leads us and he's the captain that gets us that final premiership that we've been craving for so long, does he become our best ever captain because of where we've come from? Every other captain that has almost led this football club has had that success still kind of built into the squad. And while it's hard for me to really answer that question because I haven't really seen a lot of them, I wasn't there for Sticks. I don't necessarily know to the degree of his contribution because I just didn't live it. So I think it's hard to say he'd be a better captain than Sticks, that seems to be revered as the number one for us. But as far as being someone that took us from nothing to this, he's got to be up there absolutely in that conversation. And as far as big memories, I mean, that Brisbane game always comes straight back to me, and that performance, a real dark time. You thought that was a big turning point. Definitely that goal against Sydney in the game you're talking about last year. I was lucky to be directly in front of him, looking over on level 2. So he sort of turned. It was if he was looking at me. He clearly wasn't. But those are the moments that get you up and about in those games. Someone that struggled for a lot in his career with set shots. So for that, big pivotal moment, the fuck yeah, absolutely loving that when he kicks the goal. Oh, we could just be here for an hour and talk about how good Paddy Cripps is. The unexpected Brownlow that year.
Beautiful.
It's absolutely everything. So massive, massive milestone, and just what he's done for this club and the legacy he's built is all around lifting up other people. And we just absolutely love our man Rick, and we hope to get a win from him. So let's have a look, Lockie, on how we're going to defeat the Dogs. The blueprint to victory. Let's have a little bit of look at team selection. It was a lot talked about in the build up to the game this week. I mean, I guess after it in particular, after the loss, finally get the loss. So it's a little bit easier to make changes than it is a winning team that you normally look at. So who comes in, who comes out? And if you're watching this right now, drop your ins and outs in the comments on YouTube and over at the socials at Navy Blue Corner.
Yeah, I haven't put my thought into the specifics, so I want to workshop it together. But I'm sure that in the Carlton community, when the VFL gets a win and the AFL gets a loss, there's going to be a lot of calls for those guys in the winning team to come up. So I guess Motlop is an interesting topic of conversation here. The one comment I just want to say on him is that how often do we have a player coming back from injury and we're like, go to the twos and show it?
Yeah.
And it feels like so rarely it actually happens. Like either they don't go to the twos or they go to the twos and have like a meh performance and then come back in. And I just love that what has happened here, where he had a couple games back in the VFL and didn't light the world on fire, and now he's putting the goals through. We're getting the wins. So I just want to give a shout out there that this is exactly what we've been asking for, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I guess to throw and pivot the conversation in a different way, it's probably why I was very surprised a guy like Cottrell came straight back in. I was I was very much in the Rest Kennedy camp okay, he's got a bit of a niggle. Why? You've got a guy like Hewitt that can play a similar role to him. Why risk it? Let him get right. We've got a long season. Felt the same with Cottrell. The team's worked really well. Guys in his position are performing nicely. Let's just get him right. Make him earn that spot. I like that we've done that with Motlop.
Yeah.
He's got those goals now, and definitely I think now is the time to bring him in. We need, and the small forwards have been really good right now, but I think we like Motlop in the team. And while Fantasia's done a little bit last week, didn't do a lot this week, was subbed out. I think that's my simple change. Motlop in for Fantasia. If we need someone to go a bit higher up the ground, Motlop has played that role in the twos. Is that your simple first change?
Well, that was just the comment I was going to make, where Fantasia isn't necessarily playing that like deep small forward role. So if you're comfortable with Motlop doing that, then hell yeah, let's give it a go. I think
that's where he's played in the VFL. Motlop has been very high up the ground, almost in that mold. So I think it's fine. Or worst case, there's plenty of plays you can kind of maneuver around. We've got a lot of high half forwards.
Totally. And that's the moral to my tangent from before, which is that you want these players to prove it, and then there is going to come a time where the door is knocked down. And I think it's knocked down.
Do you see, talking of small forwards, always someone like him getting back into this team? I was surprised he was the sub. Didn't mind his little cameo late. If you're bringing in Motlop, you're finding room for always in this team?
It's funny, isn't it? Because he's always the one that when you and I do like a best 23, he's not in there. And then somehow I'm surprised when he's the sub for some reason. Like, I'm like, wait, shouldn't he be in there? I don't know. I liked how the forward line was functioning in this one, in the last game early. I wouldn't be moving Williams or Fogarty out of there. Potentially Chincotta might play more of a midfield role this week, I'm hoping. So maybe that presents a spot for Owies. What do you think?
I'm going to bring him in because, I don't know, I just feel like he adds a bit of pressure, adds a bit of something, and maybe an element of him is what we were missing in the game on the weekend. Who really knows? I don't want to pin it down to one player. My reasoning for it is if I'm maybe playing Motlop a little higher in there, I'm keeping Cottrell in, not necessarily on form, but more because I want to rest Ollie Hollins. I don't think he's had the best run for the last
I don't mind that
time period. And that's not to say that he's been horrific. He's been fine. He's played his role. I don't like messing with the wings a lot, but it's a long season. I think his last two games have been a bit meh. So why not just, now that we've got a guy like Cottrell back, don't worry about that high half forward role and adding to that. Go on a wing. So that adds that extra forward spot to give always a rotation in there as Cottrell goes to the wing. And then, Ollie Hollins can he's young. He's played like every game this season. Why not get a little bit of a break?
I have no issue with that at all. No issue with that.
Do you want to see the double rucks? Does Pito find a way back in this week? Timmy English is one of the best ruckmen in the competition. I know he's not the bigger body like a Briggs or a Nankervis that we've come up in recent weeks, but do you want to see Pito back in there at all? How are you seeing the rucks this week?
I just can't see how that can happen. And we haven't even mentioned George Hewitt yet. I just can't see who makes way for Pito in this circumstance. So if you are, I'd like to hear who it is.
No, I'm not this week. I think the ruck situation works better for De Koning's matchup-wise than maybe it was on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Get the two athletic boys up and about. Why not? I know maybe there's better dual ruckman. I guess not dual ruckman, but the backups for Dogs probably are a bit better than what we can throw in there. So maybe we'll see the two. But I don't know. It's that opportunity cost. I don't know who else to move out there. Right now, Pito's not there. So let's move to that Hewitt conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Are you bringing him in? Are you bringing him in as the sub? What is your sub movement this week? I'm interested to know that kind of perspective where you're seeing the midfield in that last sub spot.
I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers because it doesn't feel like a mid necessarily deserves to make way or move to the sub.
Yeah. I don't know what to do either. It's a really tough week for selection. It's only going to get harder from here on out. I haven't made a full decision on the sub, but I'm going between two players. I'm not bringing anyone fully into the team, but a player will come into the sub spot. It's either George Hewitt or it is Cunningham. I like the idea of Cunners as the sub. I said this last week. The player he is what I like the sub being. That impact player. He's a little bit fast. He's got good disposal, front half player. Do we have too many of those kind of players right now? Potentially. But if they're all fit, can you sub out a Matty Owies? Can you sub out a Motlop and bring in someone that plays a bit higher up in the field? If you need him to go into the midfield a little bit more, you can. So I like that idea. But also, is it a Hewitt? Do we play a bit of a big body player in there? Because you look at the Doggies midfield and who they're playing, Treloar, Bont, Libba. They've got a really good midfield. We know that.
Yep.
Do you need to have that insurance policy of a guy like George Hewitt in case Kennedy's still not 100%, Chera doesn't play well again, Sam Walsh gets tagged out of the contest, and you need a little bit more in the contest, knowing that, as I said, in the other episode, in our review, we've only lost the contested possessions a few times this season, and they've been in, two big losses and are just getting over the line against Richmond. Clearly, it's a pivotal part of this team. Do we need George Hewitt in the team or as a sub if we're playing the one ruck?
Yeah, exactly. It feels like Hewitt is important to this mix this week, but yeah. But so who are your outs then? You've got Hollands, Fantasia, and a third, or no?
No, so basically, I believe it works out.
Late on me.
Always, he's already kind of in the team, but he basically just gets elevated in.
Yep.
And then Motlop and Fantasia is a switch, and then you've got one extra player, so Hollands comes out, and then Hewitt or Cunners become the sub. I believe
I'm with
you. That actually does work.
I forgot about
the
Motlop.
Sub sometimes throws me out here.
Me too. It's weird, isn't it?
Because I've got not enough players coming out of the team, but because he was the sub, it's not an in. It's so complicated. It's such a hard thing to do.
I'm with you.
Those are pretty much my changes, and I'm sure as the week progresses, I'll figure it out. Is there anyone else you think deserves to be in the selection conversation, either coming in or moving out?
Good question. I mean, again, I haven't looked at the injury list. I'm assuming Martin is still not going to be right this week. He's probably the only other one that comes to mind.
Even if he is, I'm definitely not going to be throwing him straight into the ones. Get some match fitness at least first.
You would hope so. There's just feels like there's a lack of precedent there.
Yeah.
But those changes you put out there, I'll be very happy if we roll that squad out.
Beautiful. So those are our team selection this week. Let us know yours. Most importantly, when you're doing this, who's coming in and who is coming out of the team. Give a bit of a reasoning why. Drop it in the comments right now on YouTube. Love this discussion. I'll be in there, hopefully live, or if not, I'll be in there after the fact to reply to them all. And if you're listening in audio form, head over to the socials at Navy Blue Corner. So let's jump into the grill, the corner. Every single week we chuck these out on the socials, mainly Twitter and Instagram. So make sure you head over at Navy Blue Corner, send in your questions to make sure they get answered. And this week, potentially some of the greatest and hardest to answer questions. of all time. So, Lockie, I know this is normally a little bit of a you just ask me and I sort of get absolutely grilled. I'm going to need your support and your help trying to answer these, but they leave some really good discussion points. So, Lockie, what have the people asked this week?
I'm happy to help you, mate. Help you out, mate. I don't want you to be stranded on that fence as you sometimes are. You know, the questions are just so hard hitting that it's hard to take a big leap either way. We'll see what we can do. So let's start off with this. It's a really good one from Andrew. I like how he's phrased it as well. I know you guys like controversial, so here we go. If Pito gets scrutinised for not doing stuff around the ground, should TDK get scrutinised for getting smashed in the hitouts? Not trying to have a go as I like them both, but Pito might have been handy against GWS. I mean, it's been the age-old question on this pod, but I mean, interesting, I think, to the overall narrative of these guys, this question.
Yeah, no, I love Andrew for coming in hot in this one. Like, he mentions there being a little bit controversial, but I mean, I tend to agree with, I think, the premise of it. I mean, after the battle, it's pretty easy to say, look, maybe we should have had Pito out there. Briggs was very physical, did a lot of those sort of more blocking and negating De Koning rather than trying to beat him one-on-one. He took away the athleticism that we've seen of De Koning, and that's what we love. We love the ground ball gets the ability to be a bit more athletic and win those taps. But when you look at Pito, he's the one that gets marginalized, and we talk about his shortcomings a lot, that he doesn't offer a lot around the ground. He's not doing anything when the ball hits the surface. We scrutinize him for that. Yet as soon as De Koning doesn't have a good game, we don't seem to necessarily say, okay, well, he struggled against the more physical ruckman and focus on De Koning. It's, okay, well, he struggled. Let's bring in Pitt to help him. So I agree in this for the premise of he probably should get some more scrutiny as far as what's not working for De Koning. I wouldn't necessarily phrase it in a send him abuse. We need to really look at it in a negative way, more just as a, well, okay, let's look at what's not working and how can he overcome that? If he is playing that solo ruck, what can De Koning do to make sure that if he's coming up against someone stronger that's just going to block him, how can he fix that? And do you have any kind of ideas on what can happen? Because we're probably going to see this solo ruck happen at stages throughout this season up against a more physical ruckman that might try to take away his strengths.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I think you make a really good point that I think Briggs and I guess the ruck team at GWS had a specific strategy for this that maybe we haven't seen so much. Like I'm viewing this as a little bit of an outlier game. I don't know whether you agree. I think part of it is we don't know the extent of injury potentially with him. Like it's hard to know what he was kind of working through in this game. We know he's been sore in previous weeks, had knocks in this game. So it's hard to know whether, this was just a whole bunch of things accumulated and that resulted in a game where Briggs was fantastic. I think an interesting thing, I'm not sure what your perspective is on this. You can look at a ruck matchup in two different ways where you can say we want TDK to be going against these less mobile guys and use that to our advantage. But then when it doesn't go the right way, the hindsight is really obvious. You know what I mean? So it's like, say we're coming up against a immobile, really strong tap ruckman. Do you then go Pito because you think he'll match it, or do you go TDK on the chance that you can exploit him? And it's hard to look at that one without hindsight.
No, I agree. And I think it kind of works like GWS as well. Would they have been thinking in this mode, man, if only we had someone more mobile to go with him in the air. And I like that perspective. It probably doesn't get spoken about enough. And even looking at De Koning's form, when he has come up against some less mobile ruckmen over the past month or so, we've been lauding how good he's been being able to get over that and still beat some of the more physical ruckmen throughout. It's been what's been impressive. This time has probably been that first strategy against where it looked like Briggs didn't care about the tap at all. It was, I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to sprint towards you so you can't leap. And this is just it's probably a good thing that, I mean, it's not good that we got the loss in having these learnings, but we've still got a lot of the season to go. This is an opportunity for De Koning to learn and figure out, okay, if a ruckman is going to apply this strategy, if I'm coming up against someone that's more physical that I'm probably getting outbodied by, how do I make sure that I don't lose the overall battle, that doesn't affect us? Because I think in previous weeks, we've seen him just jump over guys. It didn't work this week, so what's the strategy? And hopefully we can sort that out and learn over the next months or so. And this is something that never gets spoken about. He becomes that more Tim English style that you can't stop him. It doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah. It's interesting. And again, it's the sides of, do we want to be very matchup dependent with our rucks? Or do we want to be very process, like this is our process, this is our best team, we want to go with this? I don't think we necessarily even have an answer for that yet, because at stages we're like, Pitt and TDK, this is the one, let's do this every week. And then it was just TDK, it's like, let's do this every week. And then when we do it, it's like, well, we should have played Pitto. So
yeah, it's the toughest thing. So, I mean, literally to every single one of these listener questions, please help us out. Make sure we're not sitting on the fence, but give your thoughts as well to all of them, because they're some absolute crackers. And I mean, the ruck debate just keeps going. And like even this week, we touched on it in the selection that we kind of can't find room for Pitt in this game. It's hard to drop someone else, but you know, Rory Lobb is that second. Who are you playing on it? Is it Harry? Does Kennedy and Cripper go in there? It's a little bit more of a maybe ideal chance to play two of them, knowing it's a stronger second tier ruck. But maybe we're winning more on the ground, like you're saying in this scenario where, well, Rory's, I mean, he's a bit more mobile, but compared to a midfielder, maybe it works better playing the one. It's an interesting thing. What else do the listeners have to throw at us this week?
This is another one that I need you to help me wrap my head around, because I can't really get off the fence with this. So from Canda, when will we see Harry and Charlie firing together? It seems it's either one or the other. What needs to happen? Because once we get it right, the opposition will dread playing us.
It's so interesting. And maybe this is my least fence sit answer on like anything for the year, but I just...
Okay.
This, and I'm not having a go at the actual question because I think it's a really good question. It's a really good discussion space. I just don't agree that Charlie's out of form, that they're not firing together. I went over it a bit in, I think it was the preview for the GWS game from another great listener question. They're asking, like, is Charlie not kicking the bags this year? He's leading the Coleman, but has he had those big games? And from that, it kind of found out that he'd been a little bit more maybe consistent with his goal kicking. It wasn't these 7-8 goal games, but it was 2, 3, 4 more consistently. I think this was the first game, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, that Charlie only kicked 1 goal. He didn't get 2. Whereas last year he had, I think it was 7 games where he only kicked 1 goal. This season it's been 1 so far. And we're only halfway through the year. So it's a good sample size already that there's a bit more consistency with it. And I mean, I'd probably have to go through the numbers a little bit more on this and see the exact how many goals they've both kicked each game and compare that to last year to see if there's any differences. I think this year, I mean, Harry's already kicked more goals than he did last year. So does that just naturally take away some from Charlie? Are we maybe just never going to see these games that we pray for where it's, Charlie and Harry kick 6 each? Because how often in the modern game do 2 key forwards dominate teams like that? Is it matchup dependent where we've played a lot of good teams, so you're not going to have those? I think overall, on top of, and I'm talking for ages, but on top of I don't think Charlie's that out of form as many are saying. If these two aren't kicking 6 every single week together, but it's meaning Zach Williams kicks 1 or 2 or 3. We saw Fantasia kick 4 the other week, Fogarty. The rest of the forward line seems to be functioning the best it has. We're getting more contribution from them. Space inside 50 looks a lot better. If that's all working and we're a lot happier with how the forward line's functioning, we're winning games, all of that's happening, I don't think it matters that Charlie isn't kicking 6 if it means everyone else is kicking cumulatively, apart from Harry. Take him out of it. If the smalls are all kicking 7 and Charlie's still kicking 2 or 3, I live with that. Where do you kind of see,
Yeah.
I guess, the two? Do you think he's out of form? And I really want to know the listeners' thoughts on this because it's a great discussion point on this narrative. So drop it in the comments and let us know at Navy Blue Corner. I really like this discussion point.
Yeah, there's definitely a few things to address in that, and I generally agree with most of what you're saying. Surprise, surprise. But I think, again, it's kind of similar to the Rucks. There's a bit of a philosophical question here around and it feels common sense to me, do we want the variety of goal kickers like you're talking about? Or are there people in the Carlton community that would prefer 80% of our 90% of our goals to be kicked by those two? Because to me, that doesn't feel like a winning formula because we're susceptible to injury and we become predictable, I think. But maybe people don't agree with that. So I'm very much with you that I think at a philosophical level, it feels a lot healthier for our team if each of them are kicking 2 to 3 every week and then all our smalls are kicking one and then a few mids are kicking one. We follow Timmy Dubb's 75 rule and we're going to win every game with that formula. On Charlie's form, though, so I guess I do not think he is in as good a form as we saw him in at times last year. Not just putting them through the big sticks. I just think the eye test generally is just a little bit down. And part of that, like the treatment that he was getting on the weekend, like we were not giving him the ball in the right way. We spoke about it, in the other episode. So there's something in that, but I can't sit here and say that he's playing as well as he was last year because I just don't believe it when I watch it.
Yeah, or I would definitely agree with that. I would, for that exact statement he played better football last year. There's still elements of his game that aren't perfect this year that we've seen him perform better. I think there's stages in one-on-ones that he's really strong, but he doesn't seem to be able to out-wrestle his opponents. And I know there's talks of him potentially in that GWS game in the warm-up, injuring his ankle. Did that play a part in that game? Is he carrying a niggle? I know that's been kind of thrown out there. It always does when a player isn't performing as much as we'd like. But I just think that this conversation of Charlie's out of form, he's playing horrifically. The real big, grandiose sort of statements around Charlie's form, I think, are ridiculous. Mostly peddled by opposition fans. It's the same free kick nonsense. And it's just the more everyone says it, the more it's fact now without any true basis. If people want to legitimately go through his stats and say he's down on, is it marks that he's not getting? What's he not doing? Go through the specifics, maybe like we're talking a little bit here and bringing out those scenarios. I think that's fair enough. But overall, he's down a little bit, but I don't think it's anything drastic. And I would still say, apart from those individual moments, the rest of the team are lifting around him. And I think that's what I'm preferring overall. And at the end of the day, to go back to the root question, if Charlie and Harry kick 0 goals, but we win a game of football, I don't care who's kicking them, kind of thing. Like, agree. It would be way better if they're kicking, a bag every single week and it's really threatening the opposition. They're scared of what's happening. That would be ideal. But if we're still finding a way to score in the forward line, it's a bonus for me.
Maybe this is marginal and too marginal to even say, but I think if Charlie was to miss a game towards the end of this season, I would feel so much more confident in our forward line being able to function this season than last year. This stage last year, if Charlie missed the game, I don't know if I would have felt like we would be underdogs against almost any team because where are the goals coming from? Where's the structure? But I don't feel as much that way this year, which is, I think, a good thing.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think needs to change in order to get Charlie back to that 100%?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I felt like we spoke about it in the review. I felt like we went back to predictable ways in trying to get him the ball in this game. So I guess, I mean, the obvious answer is to try and do something different with his role, right? That's always the obvious thing to do with a player when you seemingly feel like that they need to do more. But to your point, if we got over the line this weekend, the weekend just gone, we're on a massive winning streak and everything's fine.
Yeah, I think the last thing, I just want to maybe see him move a little bit more. Sometimes he gets a little stationary inside 50. Who knows? That could be the
Yeah,
directive. It could be you standing in this
totally.
space and it's just not coming out for him because like the opposition putting more time and effort into him. We're not getting the separation. But when he does lead, up into that 50 and then wheel and go, that's something that works
Yeah.
so well for him. So if he's just able to maybe move a little bit more at stages inside 50, a little deeper, and get that separation on the lead, I think you're going to see a lot more from him because no one can kind of go with that power in the league. But it's a great question. It's a great discussion. Let us know your thoughts to it all in the comments.
Next one from Vinny. Another very nuanced question, I suppose. Do we risk managing any players this week? Or do we go all out to ensure we bounce back after the loss?
Difficult one to answer, like they all have been so far. So big shout out to everyone who's thrown these at us. It's difficult. And again, there's a lot of detail to it. I think last week, the way I see managing players to a degree, it's like if they're not 100% fit, and we can kind of manage them that way, like a Kennedy last week. Someone can clearly cover that role in a George Hewitt. You're 80, 90%, don't worry about it. I think we can manage those types of players. The worry this week is, I guess, a Wiedering type who is a test for this week in the injury report. Not 100%. It's the corky. So if he gets it again in this game, and if I'm a doggies forward, I'm going to be trying to knee the hell out of him to make sure he's not 100%. We saw in that second quarter how pivotal he is to the way we line up defensively. Our organization disappeared. We looked in all sorts down back. So without him, it's potentially really bad. But I'm not sure you can afford to manage him if he's healthy. If he passes all the tests and he's good to go, I don't think you can risk that right now, particularly with the forward line of the Western Bulldogs, which is something I wanted to talk about. We can probably do it in answering this question because I don't have Norton with the concussion, but it's Darcy, Jamara, and Lobb down there. It's three big boys to defend. I don't think we can afford to manage those players, and those that are more towards healthy, like a Cripper, I guess Walshy, that we're maybe looking to manage later in the season. Right now isn't the time to do that for me. I'd rather do that against some lesser teams, like I guess a West Coast, those kind of opposition. And maybe after we've banked a few more wins, because I think we're only, 2 points ahead of Essendon at the moment, something like that in second.
Yeah.
Bank a few more wins before we start doing more of the managing. Where do you see that balancing act?
Yeah, it just has to be so case by case, depending on the player and the injury, doesn't it? Because I think we'll all agree that if the risk is too high, according to the club, that someone could injure themselves, re-injure themselves for something that's going to mean they're going to miss a period of time, or God forbid, finals. It's just not worth it to be playing against the Bulldogs. So that is not the feeling that I get for someone like Wiedering, that that he plays through this and then suddenly he's missing 3 months. So I definitely would lean towards you that way. But yeah, it's again one of those situations where you want to just put your faith in the medical team and the club. And over the years, some people have lost their faith and lost their trust in people in those positions. I definitely haven't, so I'll be backing them in.
Yeah, and I guess that I want to kind of pivot slightly and just talk about trying to match their forward line, because the midfield's obviously a big part of this, but so is that forward line. Knowing Wiedering's a little bit of a test to play this week. Hogan absolutely gave Kempy a bath, just way too much separation, didn't get any body contact on him at all. He was just running at everything and we couldn't sort of stop it. Probably Kemp's one of his worst performances for us. He's been really good, but struggled with that matchup last week. Knowing that there's three key tools, that doesn't happen often against some opposition. What are you sort of thinking the matchup should be this week? And are you looking to bring in another key defender to help with this? Are you bringing in a guy like Marchbank or maybe a Young to help with it? Are you looking to replace maybe a guy like Kemp that is a little bit less tall and physical. I don't know, they're probably a similar height there, but I would say that, Marchbank and definitely Young play a bit taller than a Kempy. Are you looking to make any adjustments per the matchup like we maybe would a ruck situation, or is it just not something you're wanting to do this week?
I mean, 100% is something to explore and discuss. I mean, to be honest, I really hadn't even considered the fact that, like, I thought about the option of bringing, like, Marchbank in and running with 4. That on the surface sounds sensible to me. The topic of who comes out then is really tough, though. The idea of not playing Kemp and playing one of the others based on pure ability doesn't sit well with me. If it's more part of the grand scheme of things, like we've spoken about, like, do we want to is this an opportunity to get some time into Young, for example, in case we need him because Wiedering needs a break or something like that? That's interesting. You could probably tell by the tone of my voice, this is going to end with a fence sit. I would just struggle so hard to choose one of those small mediums to come out of this team to put a 4th in. But on the surface, that feels sensible.
I'd say the most obvious one's probably Cowan to come out. I agree with you. I wouldn't.
I agree he would be.
I wouldn't drop Kemp over that
well.
one. I don't think he deserves to be dropped over one poor performance after he's been so good for a while. And it was an off performance from everyone. So I think to put it on one player isn't ideal.
100% agree.
I think if you bring in Marchbank for, just for throwing it out, the hypothetical, him for Cowan, at least Marchbank, Gov, and Kemp can play smaller. We've seen them all play a role on a medium small. So if it does feel too top heavy at some stage, a little too slow, at least it feels a bit more versatile than adding, say, a Young in as that 4th. And yeah, it does help with the 3. If Wiedering gets another knock, you've got the insurance policy. However, we kind of saw last time we did this against Sydney that we just looked so slow. It didn't seem to work. So I agree with you. I'm not tinkering too much with things after one bad week just for matchups. I'm backing in the team and the back 7 that we think is our best, is what we should play each and every week leading up till finals. Like if we played a final next week, I'm not changing anyone in that back 7. So
no, God, no.
I'm sticking to what we have, but I think it's an interesting, I get just another one of those interesting discussions around what we do this week, because the Dogs and the way they line up is a little different to most teams.
And I think there's something in this similar to the ruck discussion, like extremely hypothetical, and maybe you won't have a good answer for this, but let's say that there's full health for our backline for the rest of the season. Does that mean that like Marchbank and Young just don't get a look in at all? And then, God forbid, one of them has to play finals and they haven't played at the level in just forever? Like, is that the scenario?
I'd assume maybe one of them or both get a game just for like a resting thing. Like Cowan's still young.
Me too.
So there's a chance that he may just be managed at a stage. But I'm not necessarily that fussed if they don't play, because it's just a weird thing to give them a game in case you need them. That's not what I think is smart to do, because you're just hampering yourself unless you're doing it in the sense of, okay, Wiedering is limping a little bit these last few weeks. Give him a week off.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to do it, rather than just bringing them in because you want a bit more match sharpness. It's not maybe ideal if there's an injury, but planning in case there is feels a bit iffy for me.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But yeah,
I understand that.
One. Any other questions left for us in the Grill the Corner?
Yes, let's round it home with my father, Mark, with a coaching tactics question, your favourite topic. He said possibly outcoached regarding the midfield against the Giants. So what's our best midfield mix and matchups? Coming up against a strong midfield this week, that's for sure.
No, this is one of the harder questions to answer. Probably the one I'm most likely to fence sit on, because I think in our sort of team selection, we were very fence sitting on it all, trying to talk about the midfield. And, I think we're pretty happy this week with the one ruck. However, the midfield's difficult, and it was honestly to kind of almost pivot this into the what do you want to see. Mine was about the midfield and looking at it at the moment, because to make sure there's no, I guess, misrepresentations on our thoughts on Chera at the moment, or definitely mine. Like, Chera's form coming back from the injury has been poor. We know that. Yes, I think when you look at the best performance of our midfield this season, it has been with Hewitt and Kennedy. This is more evidence that maybe we shouldn't be playing Chera at the moment. However, we both believe fully fit, peak of their powers, Chera's in that midfield. Well, at least I do. Sorry for putting words in your mouth, Lockie. I believe Chera, absolutely flying, is in that midfield. I think it's better balance.
Yep.
What's the best team all round? If you're playing De Koning, you can have Kennedy and Hewitt in the team. I think if you're playing Pito singular or with TDK, I don't think you can have both Hewitt and Kennedy. So, I mean, my midfield mix at the moment is, TDK, Walsh, Crips, Chera, Kennedy, just over Hewitt right now. But I think it can change so much right now. And that's kind of the crazy thing. We probably don't know our best midfield mix. And my what do you want to see is that I want to get a better understanding of what our best midfield looks like. Whether it's this week, next week, over the next 4 games, I think we need to get that right and need to know it quickly, just so we've got that knowledge, and heading into September, you know exactly the best team to put out there, because we just don't know that right now.
Do you have an opinion on, and lots of teams do this differently and experiment with it. Like, do you want our midfield to be a very core kind of locked in group on the day? Like guys like Hollins, for example, or Fogarty. Do you think that at our best, those guys are getting up around the ground and like we've got a lot of variety in the game? Or do you prefer to see like those 4 guys, like you said there, those 4, 3 of them are kind of on at a time and it's really tight?
Yeah, I forgot Hollins. I do want to see him get some rotations in the midfield. He would be probably on the lesser extent than all the other ones listed. They're my midfield core. So to your question, I like everyone basically locked in, a few rotating through, primarily Hollins as my number 1 rotator.
Yeah.
And then it's almost a bit more circumstantial if you think you need someone else in there to throw around and that's the spark we need, go for it. But I want to be more, this is our 4 or 5 each and every week. Let's go for it. And I think it's a good issue to have to a degree in us not knowing, because we've got options. Guys can jump in and it's not always 100%. We can almost go a little bit off form. But I think for our best shot at winning the flag this year, we need to be a little more certain than we are now. Yeah. So I think it's less of a case of we've got options and more of a case of no one's nailed down those last couple of midfield spots at this second. Plenty of time to go.
Agree.
But next month we need to figure it out. And same for the forward line. I think that's the other area where there's still a couple of positions we're not certain on. I just want a clearer vision or feel a bit more comfortable on that right now.
Yeah, there's certainly a scenario where we're sitting here recording our Bulldogs review and we're back fully on the, Chera's completely back to that form that we want to see from him. And then maybe this leads, again, I'm going to go into my what do you want to see and take one of those points. Like, there's Chincotta as well, because this feels like the first week in a few weeks that probably a midfielder is someone that we want to try and completely take out of this game. So then there's the question of that. Like, are you doing his standard forward line into the tag, or is he someone to be that we want even tighter? Because I will be fuming if the reason that we lose this game is because that man just absolutely tears us.
Well, I mean, before answering that question, I'll throw a question at you. Do you think you can tag Bontempelli?
Well, obviously that's a good question. I want us to go after that. I think we saw on the weekend that, him having a less than impactful game. And I guess the thing that teams are choosing between is, I guess, trying to give him attention or giving Treloar attention. And I mean, the evidence is kind of speaking for itself in that regard, I think. So I would much rather see us attempt it than, I guess, lose by what you know.
Yeah. No, I like it. I'm not sure you can tag Bont. I think he's almost a bit like that Crips player where they're just so strong and physical that they're going to get that contested ball regardless, more than maybe like a Merit, more explosive type that we've seen, I guess, your Chincotta's go to as far as the midfielders this year. But in saying that, I do agree in the sense of why not try it and see? You can always, within 5 minutes, go, nah, it's Treloar. Or it's Bailey Dale on the sort of half back line trying to stop someone that's moving the ball for them and intercepting. We've got options. We can rotate it. Just because we've put that on the whiteboard to start the day doesn't mean we have to keep it there. So I think my kind of look at it now is try it, because the last few weeks he's been playing a bit of a different role. Why not go back to the midfield and see that play out? Because I don't know, weirdly, and I don't want to go negative on this after 1 week, if he's not having a massively effective role on who he's tagging.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a spot for him with a few more players starting to become fit right now. And last week, Cogs didn't do a lot, but I don't think Cogs is the guy to tag. I don't think that's shutting anything down. So if that's the role he's trying to do and tag someone like that, I just don't think there's a spot for him.
We've said from the start that we think it's matchup dependent, and I think the vast majority of matchups we're going to have are going to call for this top 8 teams. So I think they most likely will be. But yeah, I agree with your point about this week. And the Richmond game was also one that we looked at kind of before it, and we're like, where does this sit? So.
Yeah, no, but let us know in the comments on YouTube, who should Chincotta tag this week? Very excited to know all your thoughts on that. What else do you want to see this week, Lockie? And again, I'm going to throw it out. I just said it then. After you've told us who Chincotta's tagging, what do you guys want to see this week? It's clearly and obvious the win, but those little more specific points that you want out of this game, let us know in the comments here on Blue Abroad. And of course, if you're listening in audio form, at Navy Blue Corner.
I'm going to guess what you've written down in your notes, because I know you, Ian, and I'm sure that you've put in there that you want some kind of Cripper moment in this game.
I've actually completely whiffed on that. So you've called me out.
Jesus, I thought I knew you.
You can go the prediction route. I've done that a few times. I want this to be something that we can clip and chuck on the social. So Lockie, absolutely go for it. The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I guess... I mean, it has to be just an iconic Cripper goal, doesn't it? It has to be a burst out of the stoppage, a burst out of the middle, run 50 metres, and then just the whole side getting around him. I think that's pretty clear in my mind to visualise how that can go down, and I think that'll warm the hearts of all of us.
Yeah, there will not be a roof left on Marvel if he does that in his 200th. And imagine that, like, the game's teetering, we need 1 goal, and just out of nowhere, Crips straight through, 40-meter run. Oh, that'd be absolutely delightful. I can't believe I didn't have that in mind. I've gone way too game-focused. My mind is on that rather than a bit of fun. I have 2 more, and one of them is simply pressure. We had our worst tackles inside 50 numbers of the year. And maybe this ties into a bit of Crips, because I've sort of written down a couple of notes saying that they're clearly going to be flat on that effort. Vossi will be abusing the boys, letting them know what they did out there against GWS with their overall pressure. So I expect us to be raring to go. And add on to that it's the skipper's 200th. If they don't get up for that, if they can't bring the heat in this contest, then they'll never be motivated to bring the heat ever. So I need that pressure back up. It'll help the contested side. It'll help get to that hashtag 75. Boys, do it for Cripper.
Took the words right out of my mouth, because that was the other one that I had. It's both us elevating on our end and trying to find ways to not allow the opposition to do that to us, because we were just so susceptible last week, and it's just such an important part of what we do. So hit me with your other one, because you've left me speechless.
Yeah, well, apologies, Lockie, for stealing that one. My last one's short and quick, which is good. Short and fast. It is proved to us that short and sweet is the goddamn phrase I was looking for. I absolutely fumbled my way through that. So luckily, the
Short
show is
and
close.
fast.
Yeah, short and fast. Two of the same words. So luckily, this show is wrapping up because clearly I've lost the plot. But the last thing that I want to see, Lockie, is prove to us that it was just an off week, because we've kind of gone into this whole preview and this whole, even the review, the GWS game, it was, we're willing to cop it for 1 week and not go as hard on really critiquing things and you know, completely abusing everyone, because we think it's just a blip. We think it's just 1 week. We're not going too angry on everything. So let's just ensure that it was. Go out there and prove that this is not going to become a trend, that what we saw in that GWS game was just simply an off week. You sometimes cannot perform at that 100% peak each and every week. Like we're seeing that with Sydney at the moment. They're 2 losses in a row. Sometimes going at 100%, you just can't sustain it for a long season. Let's make sure it was only one, Lockie.
Premierships aren't won in July, they say.
Absolutely. So that is going to wrap up our Doggies preview for this week. There's been plenty that has been discussed, so let us know your thoughts to it all in the YouTube comments here on Blue Abroad. Make sure you like the video if you've enjoyed it, and subscribe if you're not a subscriber to Blue Abroad.
Absolutely.
Not sure what you're doing. There's a lot more than just us here. We're just a mainly very little guest on this channel. There's plenty of Blues content here, and if you're listening in audio form, head over to the socials and let us know at Navy Blue Corner. Links are in the show notes. They're in the description. Make sure you follow so you never miss an episode. And we'll be back here 8 p.m. next Wednesday to run through it all with another match preview. And if you want to know our thoughts on that Doggies game, wherever you get your podcasts, and on our own YouTube channel, again, links are in the description, in the show notes. I'm bloody excited. Crippers 200th. Let's get up and about for the skipper. Up the bloody baggers. See you guys next time.